Hey everyone, this is Keith from Gaming Trend and Tabletop Throwdown, and I'm here with Jim Long from Aries Games. And we are here to talk about some of the new games that they have here at Origins. And the first one that we have here isn't exactly a new game, but it's a new reprint that they have. It's the Conan board game that was originally from Fantasy Flight. Now Aries has it. And they also have a new expansion, Adventures in Hyboria. And so we're going to take a look at the new reprint and a little bit about the expansion.
So in Age of Conan, the object of the game is to create the biggest kingdom. So it's up to 4 players. You can play 2, 3, or 4. And so you'll start off in one particular area with warriors and emissaries, and then you expand outward, conquering the smaller kingdoms near you until you come into contact with the major powers of the other players. Then you have to fight them. As you move out, you're going to create forts, turn the forts into towns. You can create towers that give you influence, and there's a couple of paths to victory. Military through influence. Of course, it wouldn't be Age of Conan without Conan, so throughout the conflict, Conan makes his way from his home toward the various different locations. When Conan's engaged in the conflict, it's either going to go really, really well for someone or really, really poorly. So you want to be on the right side of the Conan sword for something like that.
And he's a bit of a free radical, right?
He is. In the basic game, he influences combat, he influences the things that are going on around him. You can move him and he does things, but he's a little bit like a tornado in that he moves through and he causes chaos, or he interacts when there's a fight going on, but it's really hard to control him for any long term. The expansion then, what it does is honestly, it adds more Conan to the Age of Conan. So in this case, it adds this board right here where you track the growth of Conan from a warrior to a mercenary to a general, and ultimately, hopefully, to a king. It also adds some of his allies, so not only do you have Conan as a major figure on the board, you have some of the other characters as well that you can interact with them. It also adds new cards for the kingdom cards and strategy cards, and it adds a new figure called the Spy. So as you would expect from the Spy, you do a lot of sneaky stuff to backstab and to thwart your opponent's plans through spying on them.
Cool. Now, the expansion is not quite out yet.
It just came out just a little bit ago. It's on sale. Should be available at retail stores for about $35.
Cool. And then how much is the base game?
Base game is $90.
Cool. And that is available now.
Available now. Yep.
And now we're here to talk about the Aries Games Odyssey, Wrath of Poseidon.
So Odyssey is an asymmetrical deduction game. And what we mean by that is that one player plays Poseidon, and all the other players in the base game play the Greek sailors returning home from the Trojan War. The object of the game is to get from the starting location to the sacred island in the center. Now, if all you had to do was sail straight there, pretty straightforward. But what happens is Poseidon actually has Tempest tokens that he can play, and he does it secretly. So Poseidon behind this screen has the actual representation of where all the ships are. Okay, so it would start like that. Right. When he moves a ship, he would play a token, and then he gets to move the ship somewhere without the Greek sailors knowing precisely where he's moved it. So he would say, I've just moved the green ship. The game is played in 11 turns. Poseidon has 11 tokens, so we can use each token one time. That's your game tracking mechanic, and kind of gives the people some control about kind of what he can do or can't do. So most of the ships then will start sailing towards the island, pretty reasonable. Poseidon hasn't messed with them, so they know exactly where they are. But the green ship, starting here, has been messed with. So if he moves one to the northwest, Poseidon mirrors that movement and then gives the Greek sailor a sighting. He says, you are on a rocky island and you are surrounded by water. So now the Greek sailor says, well, where did he move me? I'm in one of these places, one away from where I think I am. I'm either on this island or this island. So did he move me straight backwards so that I went like this, or did he move me here and so now I went like that? So as you continue on, that's one turn. You play 11 turns. Every turn, the Greek sailors are trying to figure out where they are. Poseidon is trying to keep them from getting to the sacred island. The game is extremely scalable, so if you've got people that are really good at this, there's a lot of ways to make it harder. There are 4 boards, there are variants and optional rules you can use to scale the complexity up and down, optional winning conditions, and optional methods of playing the tokens that all make it kind of perfect for if you like these kind of games. You can make it what you want it to be.
Cool. So up to 4 players, 2 to 4, right?
You can, as many people can play the Greeks as you want to. So if you had 5 or 6 people, great, put them all and they can cooperatively play the Greeks and try to get a cooperative win.
Cool. And how long does it take about typically?
Less than an hour.
Less than an hour? And how much does it retail for?
Good question. I'll pull out my handy sheet here and say Odyssey is $40.
Cool. Not a bad game. Not a bad price for a game with that much replayability.
And I say $40. You have to edit it. It's $50, $40 here at Origins.
Okay.
Okay.
And now we're still here with Jim at Ares, and he's going to show us some of their upcoming projects that aren't quite here for Origins yet.
So the first one that's going to come out is an expansion for War of the Ring called Warriors of Middle-earth. This is the second expansion for the War of the Ring 2nd edition. The first one was Lords of Middle-earth. Warriors of Middle-earth adds different factions. So it has 3 factions for the Free Peoples and 3 factions for the Shadow. Also includes a faction dice and it has some additional stuff that we actually don't have quite yet. So these are samples of the miniatures. You have the Corsairs, you have spiders, the Dunlings, giant eagles, ants, and the dead. So what happens is factions add new strategies and tactics to the game because you can complete an objective, call the faction into play, and then you have those warriors on the map for you to use. So whereas before the Ants and the Corsairs, for example, were just a card that you would play that sort of abstractly represented the Corsairs, now you can actually have counters. You can actually use them in a much bigger way. They can take a bigger part in the story to exercise different kinds of strategies and different winning options.
Cool. Then you have, let's just go to the next one, Last Friday.
Last Friday is a horror-themed game. It is just like Odyssey. It is an asymmetrical game. One person plays the Maniac at Camp Apache, and all the other players are campers at Camp Apache who have come hopefully to set up the camp and get ready for a bunch of kids, and they find a maniac is loose on the camp and has killed the 2 senior counselors, and now he's after them. The game is played in 4 phases. So of the 4 phases, it starts off, the maniac is after the campers and he tries to get rid of them before dawn of the first day. The campers are trying to get into their cabins and lock them away. It's played on a large board, somewhat similar to other deduction type of games where you're actually moving through. So this is a portion of it. So 201 some odd locations. So as you move through here, for example, you can see the small squares. The individual camp counselors move on small squares, and the maniac moves on the number of squares using hidden movement. So the campers are never sure where he's at precisely. They have to use deduction and get clues to figure out where he might be. And so you have a conflict anytime the maniac would move over a square where there's a counselor, or a counselor moves past a square where the maniac is located, bad things happen. And depending on whether it's night and you're playing the first scenario, or whether it's the next day where the campers try to turn the tables on the maniac and try to overcome him, or whether he's trying to rise from the dead and get his revenge on them, different things happen as a result of that conflict. So keeps the suspense up, keeps the tension up, and game could be played in all 4 phases in about 90 minutes. Less time if a couple different conditions happen. So considering all the stuff that's going on, it's a very short play.
How many players is it?
So you can have 5 camp counselors and 1 maniac. So
cool.
Total of 6.
Very cool. Okay, and now we have a new card game coming from Ares called Behind the Throne. Looks a little Game of Thrones-ish, maybe?
So the object of Behind the Throne is you play someone who is trying to manipulate all the king's counselors and the people around the king to actually control the king. It's a push your luck style of card game in that on my turn, all I'll do is I'll flip over cards. Cards have a certain number, okay? So I can flip up as many as 5 cards. When I flip up a card, if the next card is lower than the card I previously flipped over, I'm in good shape. So I can keep pressing my luck until I go, ooh, I don't think I can flip anything lower than a 3. When I'm done flipping, I don't have to flip all 5. I take those cards, and now that represents influence I have on those 3 characters. Next player takes his turn and does the same type of thing. A 5, kind of right there in the middle. I'll try it. Oh, no, it's a 7. Since this card is higher than this card, these cards get discarded and no influence is gained. Comes back on my turn. As I play my cards and I flip them, 1's the lowest card. I know that I'm not going to get anything lower than a 1. I start stacking up like this. So now this represents I have 2 levels of influence on this particular character and 1 on the other ones. When you have influence, when you have more of a particular card than your opponent, you can actually use the card and turn it sideways to exercise what that particular card allows you to do. Every card obviously does something a little bit different. So you're actually using their abilities and at the same time trying to accumulate influence. At the end of the game, the person with the most influence wins. Obviously, 9 is worth different influence than 1.
And so, how do you win the game?
Win the game is there's an end of card deck, so you don't necessarily go through every single card. When you come up to the Raven, which is the end of card deck, you stop and then you count up all the different points that you have, and the person with the most hidden influence by the different people that they control, that's the person that wins the game.
Cool. How many players?
That is a good question. I think it is up to 4. I will double check real quick. Yes, 4. Ages 8 and over.
Cool. And we have one more new game coming from Aries called Dungeon Time. It looks like a card Dungeon Explorer.
So Dungeon Time represents a group of players going down into the dungeon. It gets progressively harder. It's played in 6 rounds. Each round takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, so it can be played in a very short period of time. Each player is dealt a hand of cards, and we have 2 sample hands right here, somewhat disorganized as people tend to make their hands. What happens is after you've dealt your set of hands, you're trying to complete missions. And you complete missions, which are this style of card, by actually discarding the cards at the top here. So for example, to complete this mission, Youthful Run, we'd need some coins and a grappling hook. So if we were playing the game, and typically you'd have the cards in your hand, you'd say, I'm looking for grappling hooks and coins. Meanwhile, this player is looking for maps, coins, herbs, and another map. So player's saying, what do you have? What do you have? It's played with a timer, so you have only a certain amount of time to complete as many missions as possible. So how the game would be played is you say, okay, I need grappling hooks and coins. So there's a coin, well, there's a grappling hook. Once you think you've got the mission completed, you throw it in the discard. Meanwhile, this person's saying, oh, I've got this. When you play a card, you draw a card. So we're drawing cards. I need a map. I've got some herbs. Are there any herbs there? Oh, we don't have any. Okay, so now, oh, there's herbs. So now I've got herbs and a map. I can discard this. And as you go through, you're simply drawing cards and playing cards. Periodically, you'll have to discard items without knowing whether that's going to be useful for the mission or not. When the time runs out, or you've completed all of your missions that are in the deck, you discard any cards that are left over, and then you lay out your backpack. The object of each mission is to complete 6 of the individual quests. And so what you would do is you would lay out your items. You just turn it over, so I've just got the discard turned over. When I run into a mission, I look and say, do I have those 2 items? Yes, I do. So those get put aside. I draw a cup out of the treasure pile. And now I have a cup to use in future adventures. So now I go, okay, I've got a map. I've got this. Oh, here's another adventure. Do I have enough to complete it? Yes, I do. Discard those, and then I get a bow. So as you're laying out cards, one of the things that's happening is you're trying to make sure you have enough items to complete the mission. If you don't, then the mission fails and it gets discarded as well. To win, you need to complete 8 missions in the round. Okay? You can lose by not completing 8 if you have too many items of a particular type, so you put in too many bows, for example, or if you have more than 8 types of items. So if you put in a 9th or a 10th type of item and it's not pulled off because it's used to complete a mission, then you burst your backpack and your quest is over. As you play on, the simple quests of walking through the forest and getting to your secret location, well, they just require 2 items. Ultimately, you get to the graveyard, and the graveyard requires 3 items. You go down into the dungeon, well, that requires 4 items. And fight the dragon at the end, that requires 5. So as you play the individual rounds, the rounds get progressively harder and harder until, to win the whole game, and it's cooperative, as I mentioned, to win the whole game, you get through the 6th and final round, defeat the dragon by completing 8 missions in the final round, you won the game.
Cool. How many players is this going to be for?
This is for up to 5.
Cool. Do you know or have any idea the expected play time?
You can play 5 people less than an hour easy. This has actually it's going to be a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter campaign starts on June 27th, and so people get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about it then.
Cool. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks.